Welcome to Flat Earth Debate, Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere. There's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Speaking of Patreon, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon. So a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Guns of Navarone, RMP, Troy Shuka, Bose Nail, Justin Duso, Joseph Pizarro, Samson, Maris, Harry Blade, Mobile Max 777, Neo the One, Lost Cat FE, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Del West Watson, Mike, Muted, Dick Earth Skeptic, NA Literalist, Maria Neelands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, Rob H, Nathan Thompson, The Real Gabster, Windrider, Liam Nedrick, Erwin Jennisons, Abraham Mohammed, Dave Rakia Gafford, Naibai, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic 936, Life is Short, Fireball X, Texas Mike, Edwin Johnson, Kirsten Smith, Alexander Main, David Wayne Foster, and Dank. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Now I'm going to hand over to whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their conversation while I set up for today's live show.
I've written a piece of music for the Flat Earth community because I bought a drum kit. Would you like to hear
it? Maybe.
I'm back.
It's only a short piece of music, it's not going to be forever. But the Flat Earth community is the greatest place to be. The people who think that the globe is round should go away because they know they're wrong and we know we're right. We are the Flat Earthers and we are always right.
Beautiful.
You got too much spare time on your hand.
Don't give it a day.
Well, I thought I'd rather spend my time, writing music about the Flat Earth.
Good for you.
God. Out of 10, how would you rate the jingle that I made?
Oh, 1 out of 10. Sorry.
1 out of 10?
Yeah.
That's fine, because that is constructive criticism, because I will come back 10 times better. And I'll have a jingle for you that you can actually put on the start of your show, right? Be like a little jingle for the intro. Mate, I can envision it.
Me too.
Right. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to share with you. So I hope you have a good show, Nathan. I'll probably have a look on YouTube.
Cool. See you in 10.
My word.
I was going to rate it as 0 so it could come 0 times better.
It's pretty funny, though.
I know, I just stepped away to pour a cup of tea and I came back to that. It was, what the...
Yeah. People deal with their pain in their own special, particular ways, right?
Right.
A little bit telling.
So how about just the defense on the housekeeping questions? Can they start there before they start making songs?
Yeah, it's just ridicule, right? Look, I'll pretend to be a flat earther and make a dumb song up. Fair enough. If that's how you want to deal with your pain, I don't care. Super chat before we've even gone live from James Richard. Hunting Globies, : when that globe looked up to lick the globe, open bracket salt liquor, I had hung from the dung dang tree. The black swan got 'em right between the eyes. Good morning, panel. Thank you for the super chat, James Richard, even though you can't hear me, because we haven't started yet.
Good morning.
Yeah, great.
I can't wait to see what's coming next.
Interesting start, eh?
It is. Oh.
It's good to be back, though. Stressful as it was fixing computers, it's good to be back.
Yeah,
Over
it
notched.
is.
Go on.
No, I was saying they're throwaways now. The way they price computers and everything, they don't last long, and unless you really build one yourself and have quality parts, the advice you get, oh look, you only paid $600 for that. I think just buy a new one.
Yeah, it's a $3,000 PC that I built myself with the top quality parts, the best available. It still goes wrong. The hard drive's worth about £400. Just the solid state hard drive that runs the show, and that is what became corrupted. So I knocked the computer with my elbow as I spun around. I also knocked a cup off, and distracted by the cup that I knocked off, I'm like, oh, has it spilled anything? Oh, it was empty. It doesn't matter. And then I turned back around, and everything's shut down. I'm like, you can hear it on the recording because you can hear me turning around, and that turning around is what caused me to A, knock the computer, and B, knock a cup off. Well, like I say, that's all that happened. I knocked it slightly, admittedly with it was a fair old whack. I turned in my seat and went clonk. It hurt my elbow, so obviously it was a fair old clonk. But by the same token, you don't expect that to completely disable your PC, right? But there we go. They're sensitive components, I guess.
Well, is it positioned in a way to where you can't be knocking it off today?
No, it's right next to me. It's just the way it is. It needs to be, though. There's certain cables, like the 4K camera. It only allows a certain length of cable. You cannot extend it. It's just stupid. There we go. It's in this position for a reason. I mean, that would be the next thing I probably invested in, but to be perfectly honest, I don't see the point. I'm on camera for about a minute. Maybe with the 2 intros and 1 outro, right? You've got 3 minutes of me actually being on camera. What is the point in buying a capture card and a really good camera just so I can look nice? I'm not that vain. Obviously people are being critical of it, which is why I'm considering doing it. But by the same token, it's like, do you really care what I look like?
Yeah.
Well, clearly people do.
No, I don't. Like you said, you're making a little cameo appearance now and then. That's regular. Camera's fine for that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a token gesture, just to show that I am actually real and I'm actually sat here. But as I'm getting older, I'm getting uglier, so it's not like it really matters.
Hang on, I haven't looked in the mirror in 10 years. Let me go tell you what I...
Oh, same here, exactly. You kind of get to a point and go, oh, that looks rough. I don't think I'll look again.
You keep using the same picture when you're 36.
All the pictures are just with me with the kids, and it's the joyous look on my face because I'm sat with my kids, as opposed to, back in my 20s, it was getting a really nice profile for a dating profile or whatever, to find yourself a good woman. Whereas those days are gone. I can't think of the last picture I had taken of myself on my own. I have to go and get screenshots from the show. If I need a picture or for a thumbnail with me in it, I have to go to the show and find me on camera to find I say half decent, it's not that great, but a picture of me. Because all of them are just me sat with my kids. Sat with my wife and kids, or sat with Santa, wife and kids. That was the most recent picture I've got. Me, Santa, and the 2 kids and the wife.
As you get older, it doesn't matter, because only in those early teenage years, you're looking at the mirror, making sure you look good, because, that's just on your mind. And you get older, you come home with your shirt unbuttoned, or buttoned incorrectly where it's not at the exact same place, and the wife says, hey, did you know you've been walking around all day with that shirt buttoned that way? And I go, yeah, what about it? It doesn't matter anymore.
I mean, I'll make an effort for my wife. If we're going somewhere, I'll for her sake make myself look presentable, so that I'm not an embarrassment to her. That's about as far as the extent of vanity goes. And that's to keep my wife sweet more than anything else.
Well, my wife just says, that doesn't match. Get this one on. Okay, fine.
Well, that's another way of looking at it, to stop that conversation. I'll make sure I'm kept presentable. Maybe that'll fade with time too.
Not much I can do with a mountain man beard.
Shave it off.
So you can do with a mountain man beard? Like, you want one?
No, I was saying, I don't know how I can look gentlemanly and presentable for my wife having the mountain man beard that I got right now.
shave it off.
You just groom it.
Yeah, I guess I could.
Yeah, you just groom it. Yeah, beards are cool. I like beards. I don't currently have one, but I did a while back ago. And but some people really look good in beards. Their face matches them.
Fascinating stuff we're discussing here on Flat Earth Debate pre-show.
Heck, the globe is dead. I mean, everything about the globe is a begging the question, presupposition, or they can't even start talking about it. Like the one statement you always say, the Earth is obviously observably flat and motionless, or stationary, either one. Well, that's what we all experience. And so you have to beg the question that we live on the globe. What's his face? Aristophanes, or a guy who was over there in Cyan and Alexandria with the well. The whole point of him is he's seeing light go through the well and hit the bottom, but 500 miles or whatever away, it's got a shadow. Well, that doesn't prove the Earth is a globe. I mean, there's so many ways that can happen today.
Yeah, Aristophanes.
Yeah, so he says, based on that, it's 7.2 degrees from the center of the Earth. Well, what center of the Earth? And 7.2 degrees from there, how'd you get there to even take that measurement?
They assume a centre of the Earth. And then they do the little well trick. Insert R into the measurements they take. And Bob's your uncle. If we're on a sphere, is the statement, then we will experience blah, 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 wells and shadows. Therefore, we're on a sphere. It's begging the question, affirming the consequence, like all of them.
Yeah, but they need that center of the Earth, and they need light to come in parallel rays for it to work. And light doesn't come in parallel rays, and no one's been to the center of the Earth to take a measurement. So, strike two right there.
Yeah, they just assume it. Start with the premise that they're trying to prove if we're on a sphere. And because most of the Western world are already indoctrinated to believe that they're on a sphere to begin with, nobody spots the magic trick.
Yep.
In fact, when you get a bit further down as a fundy, you start justifying the magic trick. Well, we already know we're on a sphere. No, that's what you're trying to prove. What's your proof? Well, if we're on a sphere... No. That's assuming you're on a sphere. Yeah, but we already know. And so you go round and round in circles. It's like, no, you can't start with the supposition that you're on a sphere and then go forth to try and validate your presupposition. You're not validating it empirically. It's not an effect that you're trying to manipulate a cause. It's not science, just an assumption, a logical fallacy. Unless you've got something to actually measure that you're on a sphere, as opposed to starting with the assumption that you're on a sphere and then reifying horizons into positions that aren't physical, then, unless you do all that nonsense, then you can't actually justify being on a sphere, because we're not. Hey, Arwin. Hear me, Arwin? I'll do a quick sound check before we go live.
I can hear you.
Excellent. Good to have you. How's it going?
Everything working all right?
It was working on ball busters, so that was my test run. So I know everything's pretty much functional, other than the YouTube bit, but I don't think that's going to be affected by my PC going wrong. So I don't think that's going to make any difference. I would assume.
Right.
I can just press the button in a minute and it'll all go live, but thank you for scaring me. welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, as James Richard has done just before we started going live, massive thanks to you. Smash the super chat. Also, there's a Patreon and PayPal link together with a crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected. And if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by 10th Man, Arwin, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome one and all.
Good afternoon.
Good morning.
Yes, people out there, share the show, but not on YouTube because you can't do that anymore. But because of that, you'll just have to share it everywhere else as much as you can. Let's get Nathan to the 20,000 subscriber mark.
Oh, thank you,
It's
Arwin.
about time.
It's a very important point, and it's just universally true for us in this subject matter. You know, they've openly and overtly said that they're not going to promote us. Quite the contrary. Well, if they're openly and willingly admitting that to Congress meetings and telling them how they're going to deal with this, then obviously we're not going to receive any promotion. That's pretty obvious. So therefore, the only promotion we do get is by people sharing the show, which is why I say it every single show. A couple of quick shout-outs before we jump into housekeeping. So James Richard, thank you very much indeed. I did read out your super chat in the pre-show, but I'm going to try once more. So Hunting Globies, : when that globe looked up to lick the globe, salt liquor, I had hung from the dang dung tree. The black swan got 'em good, right between the eyes. Good morning, panel. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat, James Richards. It was very difficult to read. I don't know why. And also a shout out to that flat fellow. So really appreciate the support. Thank you for the sunglasses super chat. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon, formerly known as Earth curvature?
Not even from the dang dung tree.
The dang dung tree? Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
No 15-degree deviation of the Earth-based variety, but luminaries have it.
The Earth-based variety? No?
No, not.
Everyone's off mute in the
No.
Discord server. Any evidence of axial rotation? Don't all go at once?
If there were axial rotation, then you wouldn't notice it. Everything would just seem to stand still because you don't see anything.
No, you
about
would.
it.
You'd see 15 degrees an hour deviation. It's called Coriolis effect. If things left the non-inertial spinning reference frame, you'd
Oh, you mean
continue to
tornadoes?
rotate underneath them.
You mean tornadoes?
No, not tornadoes. You would observe deviation. So as you continue to rotate underneath things that were no longer attached, they would seem to deviate. For example, you send a drone up. So you've got a drone and you push the up stick and it just goes up. And then you let it hover. Well, if you're rotating underneath, then it would seem, on the equator, for example, to drift away at 1,000 miles an hour as you rotate underneath it. That's what Coriolis effect is. The apparent deviation of something that's not actually moving, a hovering drone, because you rotate underneath it. But if that was occurring, we'd be rotating underneath stuff, and we'd notice there'd be Coriolis effect. And all we get is people defending the fact that we don't see this deviation. But there'd be an effect.
Well, the only alternative would be that the entire universe would be spinning around us.
Well, then no Coriolis effect.
Yes, well, that's what the ballers say. So
No, they say there is a Coriolis
that
effect.
they're actually claiming the entire universe is spinning around us, and the Earth is not spinning underneath. They just don't really realize it.
Yeah, they're denying their own claim, though. They're denying that there's Coriolis effect, and they say, no, we wouldn't expect things to drift apart. The Earth and the atmosphere move as one. Well, it's like, well, then you're in denial of your Coriolis claim that they drift apart at 15 degrees an hour, because that's what's supposed to happen to prove we spin. But we don't observe the effect. Even the trench-level fundies come here to tell us just how much we don't see the effect, or even tell us how their reference frames have been ruined. Right, Simon Dan?
Isn't basically the assumption of the Coriolis effect consequences based in normal Euclidean thinking when it's kind of already stated that there's bending of space-time going on? Well, maybe the bending of space-time of the Earth is what causes all these Euclidean and presumed effects to basically go away and make it all relative, so that the Earth is actually standing still towards itself and the entire universe is spinning around it, when the same could also be said in the reverse because of the bending of space-time.
Yeah, but then no Coriolis effect. Hold on, 10th. But then no Coriolis effect, Darwin.
Right.
Well, then not right. They claim there is Coriolis effect.
Well, they're wrong.
Well, I know they're wrong.
They
There is
should
no
stop doing
nothing
that.
drifts away at 15 degrees
they're
an hour as
wrong
we
in their own
rotate
model.
underneath it. So there is no Coriolis effect. Nothing is drifting away at 15 degrees an hour as we rotate underneath it to cause this apparent deflection at 15 degrees an hour. That does not happen. It's supposed to if we're on a globe Earth that spins, though. It just doesn't.
I just don't know how Arwen snuck in the bending of space-time on this question.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Gravity? No. Bending of space-time. We're not
That's
talking
gravity.
about gravity.
Yeah, that's gravity.
Gravity is just an effect of the bending of space-time.
No,
Not
it's the
talking
effect
about
of the
gravity.
uneven distribution of mass. The bending space-time is gravity.
What?
The uneven distribution of mass is what they claim in their conceptual model causes the bending of space-time. That is gravity, according to Einstein. Conceptual mediums being bent. Space-time, that's gravity.
Okay, now I'm lost.
The cause, according to them, is the uneven distribution of mass. That's their cause. The effect, that's gravity, is the bending of space-time. That's the effect according to them. There is no effect. You can't bend a concept. You can't bend time. Space, in their vernacular, is outer space, and it's fake. You can't have gas pressure without a container.
But what does gravity do then if it is
Nothing.
the bending of space-time?
Nothing. It doesn't do anything. It's not a force.
It doesn't do it.
It doesn't.
But the ballers think it does a lot of things, though.
Yeah, they think it does. Yeah, you can think of it as a force, Arwin.
Oh, right. But how would a force then do those things? How would that force keep the gas pressure to the ball?
No.
If that is what gravity's supposed to be doing.
No. Thinking of it as a force doesn't make it do anything either. Just means you think about it doing stuff when it doesn't actually do it in physicality. Shout out to M for joining as a hyena.
I understand that, but if you're thinking of something, you would like that thought construction to be at least yielding a positive result for the mind experiment.
That's true.
Wouldn't you?
I often think of my Lexus as a Lamborghini.
Okay. Cool.
It's not a
Nice.
Lamborghini though, is it now? As much as I think of it as one.
Well, if thinking about it as such yields some kind of productive result to you, then why not?
Well, it's mental masturbation. You can think of it as a force.
Okay, but I'm just wondering, like, why would you want to think of it as a force that when it presumed to be a force doesn't actually do anything
Because it's
useful
the only way.
for the model?
Because it's the only way to keep the model going.
No,
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 but it
hold
doesn't
on, hold
keep
on.
it going.
Are we-
That's
hold
the
on. Are
problem.
we-
It doesn't actually do anything within the model, even if you think.
No, it does. That's where you're wrong.
instinct.
Yeah, no, hold on. No. Conceptually, it does do something. Conceptually, just not physically.
What?
In the model, it does a lot of stuff, Arwin. Man, it does
Yeah, but
do a
what?
lot in the model. Oh yes, oh
Like
yes,
what?
oh yes.
But what does it then do in the model? What
Well,
does the gravity thought of as a force actually do
Told
within
you.
the model?
Told you 3 times. In the conceptual reified model that isn't physical, it's the bending of space-time caused by the uneven distribution of mass. Well, that's a lot going on there, conceptually.
No, that's a description of what it is or what it's supposed to be doing, but it doesn't actually describe what that does. In the
It does.
model.
It
It's
bends
just a story to
space-time.
fall
That's
back
the
on. It
effect.
doesn't actually describe doing
Yeah,
anything.
it does. It's bending space-time, Arwin. It's just the fact that space-time, this conceptual medium, isn't something real, doesn't mean it's not conceptually bending it, and that's doing a lot of stuff in the model. There's stuff going on,
Like
man.
what?
Just not
Like what?
physically. All mental. All in your mind. There's a lot going on there, just nothing going on in physical reality. Doesn't mean nothing's going on in the model, though. Doesn't mean it doesn't do anything in the model.
So what does it mentally do within the model then, and not
Bend space-time! For God's sake!
Yeah, what does that do?
In physical
how does that
terms,
connect to
nothing.
anything else in the model?
In physical
It allows
terms,
Dr.
nothing.
Becky to get a PhD because of the
That's
model.
not part of the model.
Let's move on. Any single viable
No,
hypothesis.
not moving on. I want to
Why
get to
not?
the bottom of this one. What does it actually do besides just being a
The
fallback
bottom,
trope?
I see.
The-
The bottom, well, that's relative. Especially within the model.
Oh God. So
Thank
it's
you.
literally just a dead end that doesn't lead to anything. That
No, it
was what
leads
I
to
was trying
time
investigate.
bending. What's your problem? Why aren't you conceptualizing this like the rest of the fundies?
Because I'm not a funny.
There's our problem.
Yeah, I
Go on,
don't
Elijah.
trust them. I know.
Hold on, Owen. Go ahead, Elijah.
Well, I guess there's a mass there, so it acts on space and time as if, I guess, space and time is a quote rolling other masses to the bigger portion of mass, whatever mass is. Is that what's happening conceptually?
Perfect. Now you're talking like a fundy. See? Why is it Eli can conceptualize this nonsense like a fundy, and you can't, Owen?
I can. I'm just trying to look within the premise of the conceptualization and trying to find if it actually leads anywhere but a dead end. And my conclusion now is no, it doesn't. It just leads to a dead end where it doesn't actually tie in with anything else but a dead end.
Anything else physical? And you'd be correct.
Well, there are
And-
other parts of the model that it could potentially tie into, but it just doesn't. It just leads to this dead end.
Indeed. Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
What do astrophysicists think gravity is?
Only in the model.
Bending of
No, come
space-time. Bending of space-time? They're currently on Einsteinian rhetoric.
No, that's not the right answer. The right answer is we don't know. Next question.
That's a Neil deGrasse Tyson quote when asked what gravity was.
Indeed.
No viable hypotheses? Anyone in Discord? Anyone got any science for the globe? Tumbleweeds. Clearly not. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
Distance to what exactly?
Don't know what it is, but
The sun.
Then how can you figure out a distance to it if you don't know what it is?
like flies all over it, Arwen, aren't you? Yeah, you're right. This is a silly question. If we don't know what it is, and it's a non-tangible object that moves as you move, then how are you supposed to measure it?
Right. What's the distance to a rainbow? Where's that pot of gold at?
Well, precisely. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
I've heard somebody defending that though recently, or defending it, making claims about it, drawing the molten iron core conception into a very flawed model idea of how things transpire. That was Ken Hovind. He actually addresses it sometimes. It rarely happens though. I don't hear any ballers out there ever even addressing the molten iron core. And probably for very obvious reasons, because Ken Hovind immediately fell in that trap by saying, oh, the magnetic field caused by the molten iron core. It's like, no. It's molten
what
iron,
molten iron
it's
core?
non-magnetic. It's beyond the Curie point. That's probably why ballers don't talk about the molten iron core.
It's a different kind of magnet for them.
Yeah, that's a special pleading fallacy. Hey, Chocolate.
But that's what they do.
A different kind of special
Good
magnet
morning,
that
guys.
doesn't apply to the normal rules of magnetism. Yeah, that's special pleading fallacy.
Right, they'll say it to everything. Say, well, it's a different kind of substance up there next to the vacuum of space, and that's why gas pressure could exist in a gradient next to a vacuum of space. It's a special kind of thing.
Yeah, special
it's
kind
kinda
that
like
goes
refraction of a different character. Something like
a
that.
refraction of a different character. Epic. Who was that said that?
That was that PhD Tony guy. I forget
Oh,
his
Tony
name.
Tony Purcell. Of course it was.
Yeah, him.
Any evidence of the R value? Earth radius.
Long gone dead.
Again, there's quite a few people in Discord. This is the fundamental premise of the globe religion, that you have an R value to assume.
That would be the easiest thing, if it was one, to prove and show, wouldn't it?
Without R, they can't start the statement that they start for every single globe claim to be proof ever, which is, if the Earth is a sphere, you're going to need the R value to start your statement with that. And it's dead. Black Swan killed it. Last, but by no
mathematically,
means...
it's still there. Oh, sorry.
That's all right, go ahead.
I'm just saying that mathematically R will always be there. As long as they assume a sphere, they have to insert an R-based system, even though it's supposedly debunked. Because they can't have a model without that R at all.
Yeah, absolutely correct. That's the starting point for their assumption, and every single claim proof of a globe ever will start with that assumption, if the Earth is a sphere. That requires an R value, and they can't get one anymore. They've debunked it when they told us it was refracted horizon, when their horizon was previously blocking boats and buildings with its physicality, measurable in feet and inches and meters, excluding all perspective. Well, now they tell us it's non-physical, it's refracted. Well, where'd you get your R value then? Oh, you don't! Bye-bye, globe! Horizon not physical, you're telling us how non-physical it is, and it needs to be blocking boats and buildings with a calculable feet and inches value. Not anymore!
Right, they don't own an R value anymore, but they're still leasing it, though. But they know that at some point they have to pay it back.
Yeah, it's on borrowed time, for sure.
Actually, they're renting it, and it hurts.
It's more like that, everyone's subletting, and they're completely unaware that they're subletting from someone who's lost their lease.
How'd you miss that clever pun right there?
What was your pun? I missed it, you're right.
I said they're actually renting it, and it hurts.
Hurts?
Hurts rent a car?
Hurts.
God.
Oh,
The
die.
argument hurts them. Too early.
I was thinking of frequencies when you said hertz, like kilohertz, megahertz.
Oh, that's true. They could go that way too.
That joke is for America.
They're always so layered. That's what makes it worth it.
Thank you, Elijah.
Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without a container for all the fundamentalist religious zealots who believe the sky is a vacuum. Don't be shy,
Just don't think
fundamentalist
about
religious
it.
zealots.
Even the vacuum has a container, so I don't know how they go about that.
Nah, it's just lower pressure everywhere. I think that they were just wrong with their assessment of this extreme vacuum. It was just a bunch of theorists. They never even tested that, They just assumed that it would have to be sort of mathematically and all that, still presuming that gravity is a force even at that time, which it no longer really is recognized as. So I think that the original conception of the extreme vacuum of outer space was just a raw estimation. They don't actually know that it is out there, So if
not
there
out
is a
there.
giant amount of space around us or above us, it's probably just filled with lower gas pressure.
Then it's not a space. If it was a space, 10 to the minus 17 tall space vacuum, then the gas we breathe would want to fill it. Shout out to Twad Wazzle for joining as a penguin, and also shout out to Bobby Zines for hitting the super chat, who says, question, is Tim Osman, aka Infinite Plane Society, same? No. So Tim Osman, with a Z, is Infinite Plane Society, and is a different spelling and also a different reference to a different Tim Osman. It's not his real name in both instances. But Tim Osman, with a double S, is cognitive dissonance, formerly known as cognitive dissonance, was his most prolific troll name before he just gave himself Tim Osman as the name. Anyway, they're different people. No, Infinite Plane Society is not Tim Osman. No. Thank you for the super chat, Bobby. Hope that clarifies things.
If I can still address the whole calling it space, like in my room, I also have space. So it would not be that hard to basically say, yeah, okay, it's not a vacuum space, but there's still a lot of space there, right? So it's just filled with something else, lower gas pressure. I think they could just decide to migrate there at some point. Just say, no, okay, well, it's not actually a vacuum, but it's still low enough to cause all kinds of hazards and all that.
Didn't they just do that when they said the moon is... Sorry, Charlie.
No, but they
I
didn't
was
really.
gonna say they're gonna have to start scrubbing all the videos and documentation of them calling it the vacuum of space.
Right.
I'll get in touch with
vacuum,
they
lower
call it all the
pressure.
time.
But they could lawyer their way out of it, I think. Just call it.
Well,
yeah,
they'll
but
stick it down the
vacuum
memory
is
hole.
also considered lower pressure, and so it wasn't actually the original vacuum idea. It's just lower pressure. They could weasel their way out of it. No problem. If they were ordered to.
Yeah, they will have to. I mean, ultimately, it'll go down the memory hole. If you're not familiar with that reference, go and read 1984 again. But yeah, it's very easy for stuff to get stuffed down the memory hole and a narrative to change. It's confused by people who look at pop culture and think they've seen a change in a film with Mandela effect. And I mention this because, specifically, this was something pointed out to me by Infinite Plane Society, aka Tim Osman, and Paula, Bible literalist. You couldn't get more stark contrasting people with the same view on Mandela effect, which is to say that it's standard practice in media to change stories, right? That's standard fare. But most people are blinkered to it. And the Oceania versus, what's the other one in 1984? I forget. They change who's at war with who all the time. 1 minute they're allies, then they're at war with them, and people just don't bat an eyelid. But yet people in the conspiracy realm will look at these obscure things that they think have changed within advertising or pop culture, and it's like, who cares? Changing things, aka Mandela effect, if you want to call it that, is standard media practice. Anyway, that concludes the housekeeping. Unless there's any evidence that we can have gas pressure without a container, given that they do actually claim it's 10 to the minus 17 torr, the most powerful vacuum known to man, Arwin. Not just space with gas pressure. As much as they might change the rhetoric.
But has any fresh claims been made about this, or is it just repeating of the original assessment?
You say the original assessment? I don't know how long it's been in place. If you told me tomorrow that really it was only finalised 100 years ago, I'd believe you. The story of space vacuum, that is.
Right, I don't know either, but it should probably be after the Big Bang Theory was made up, right? Or before?
Well, that's only, 70 years ago? So it would be before
the 60s.
Is it less time than that? Is it 50s?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
It's really young. You were surprised about that the last time too.
It's Lemaitre, isn't it? I just don't know these.
Yeah.
I don't know the time span of when Lemaitre was around. I've never looked into Lemaitre particularly. Cursory glances here and there, but I don't know his history or when he was around. So,
well, he was at that big conference that QE always talks about, where Bork and Einstein and everybody was in, I think, 1920s or so. Remember that one?
I know which one you're talking about. So it's that ilk, it's that era. So when I say 100 years plus in terms of Big Bang, but I'm sure the sky vacuum existed before Big Bang cosmology, right? I don't know. I should know this history better.
Well, he was at that conference, and he was a younger scientist, and then it wasn't until later that he and Einstein kind of got together and shared ideas, and that's when the Big Bang actually came out officially. So it was after that conference.
I mean, the stories and the details about what these people said and did at these conferences, etc., within recent history, which is what I'd call that, I think a lot of it you can't really get around. In other words, they haven't been gone long enough to start fiddling with the narrative too much. But you go past that, maybe a couple of 100 years, and I think they just invent people. Yeah,
like Aristophanes and Cyan and the
But it was Jaren that got on this tip because of it. You know, he started throwing out everything he knew or thought he knew on account of the fact that there was no primary source evidence when you're going back through really old history books. You're like, okay, there are subtle differences between the older ones and the new ones, but how far does it go back? Well, not very far, is the realistic answer. Well, if you've got no primary sources for any of this stuff, how do you know it's real? You don't, is the answer. Even by their own historic standards, you know, that's a historical standard, a very different standard to what we tend to demand here, which is scientific evidence. But, you know, by the historical standard, you'd need primary source evidence, and there isn't any for this shit. Excuse my language. I think our whole history of the globe... Go on.
If they think they're going to weasel away from needing containment, well, I'd say that you'd still need containment for what we see as a rainbow, which is actually a 360-degree ring. And in order for that to happen, the light has to pass through a solid surface. Which is why in Mongolia, they're claiming, oh, they're creating artificial suns somehow, because they can't just accept the easier idea that this place is covered and closed.
Right. Indeed. Yeah, we must have containment, that's the bottom line. So this whole notion of having a sky vacuum is absolutely absurd and ultimately a violation of natural law. It's a violation of the second law of thermodynamics to assert that we've got a vacuum of the sky. We haven't. And for anybody who doesn't realise the implications thereof, it means all pictures claimed to have been taken from that region are automatically fake. Hence, we never talk about anything that's claimed to be proof from space here. That never happens. It hasn't happened in easily 2 years. It just doesn't happen anymore. Why? Because it's instantaneously debunked when you ask how you can have gas pressure without a container. If this region that this photo has come from is a vacuum, which it absolutely will be claimed to be, then how do we have gas pressure here? The gas would fill the space. It's entropy law. Therefore, who's ever going to come to us and present a picture of Earth from space or anything else from space as a claim proof of anything? Well, they won't, because it won't last long.
So, Nathan, I just put 2 things up in Masterby if you want to go there. These are the other individuals are credited to what also Eratosthenes did. So this is who they cite.
In Master B, you say?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, it's up.
Yeah, so they give, let me scroll down, I'm on the actual side here. Okay. Arabhata, whatever, however you say that one. So was an Indian mathematician who lived from 476 to 550 AD and accurately wrote of the Earth as being spherical. He also estimated the circumference of the Earth within 67 miles of modern measurements, off only approximately 0.27. Then, of course, we have Big al-Biruni next, a Persian mathematician who lived from 973 to 1048 AD. Al-Biruni used triangulation to measure the Earth. His estimate was that the Earth had a radius of 6339.6 kilometers, which is 16.8 kilometers less, also approximately 0.27 off the modern measurement. And the last guy, Robert Helmert, I never heard of him. In 1906, the German geodesist Frederick Robert Helmert determined that the Earth was a global ellipsoid calculated within 100 meters, 0.002% of modern measurement. The only problem is black swan.
Do you want me to go on to the next one?
No, that was it. That was the one with the last guy on it.
Oh, my
I'm
bad.
on the
Okay,
actuals.
yes, I see. Yeah, they need a physical geometric sphere-edge horizon to make these assertions, and they don't have one anymore. They're telling us how it's non-physical refracted, debunking all of these claims made by people like al-Biruni that they've measured a radius by way of dip angle from a physical horizon, the one that they claim blocks boats and buildings, right? Well, they haven't got that anymore. The globe is dead. So quiet. Normally that would be the interjection point from a fundamentalist zealot who's really triggered about the fact that the globe's dead.
And that's why it's quiet, because all the arguments defending it are dead too. Remember a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, Rumpus was on the show, jumps in every now and then, and I had a little time with him before everybody else got him. And I said, Rumpus, is the Earth rotating? He wouldn't answer it. He evaded that question till the end. Then he says, yes, it's rotating. It's like one of their chief claims. He's shy about it. But come on, Rumpus, come back. Let's see if he can answer it quicker today.
No, it's not rotating, because their claim that we have Coriolis effect would be an effect we'd observed, and we don't. It's just that simple. So it's a very difficult and tricky subject. It's gone from quite annoying, convoluted and complicated to quite simplistic and quick to deal with. Are we rotating? All right, so we have Coriolis effect then. We're turning underneath stuff. No, it's all turning together. No Coriolis then. End of conversation.
Hey, Adam is in the chat, by the way, and he says about the vacuum thing that it's apparently in the 17th century discussed, but he says that no one has even directly claimed it. But
okay,
would be interesting. Adam, get in here.
Yeah, I was going to say I can't phrase my questions through the chat to get concise answers out of him, but I'd love to know the history of the claim that we have an empty space, 10 to the minus 17 Tor above our heads, with clouds that were also looking between us and it, not dispersing into it. Their claim that it just gets thinner and thinner and thinner and is eventually a vacuum is a violation of natural law. High pressure wants to go into low pressure, so therefore the sky vacuum would be an empty space for the gas we're breathing to fill, and fill it must. That's what gas does, it expands in all directions. So where did this idea come from? Who's the first to postulate it? 1700s? Yeah, it's on the borderline for maybe having a primary source for someone, but Adam's saying no. It would appear no definitive time, just assumptions. Maybe Pascal in the 17th. Maybe Michelson-Morley later. It seems no one claims it directly. Thank you very much, Adam. Talking about space as a vacuum, he thought it was worth giving extra clarity to what he was talking about, but yes, the sky vacuum specifically.
Can I try to propose a viable hypothesis of astrophysics?
You can. Just before you do, though, I'll just read out Brian's comment. It says NASA claims it, Nathan. Yeah, they do. NASA claim it's 10 to the minus 17 Tor. Feel free. Who was it? Eric. Is it Eric Bear?
Yeah, that's me.
Go ahead. Feel free.
I don't know if the independent variable can be if it's valid, but full moon causes increase in crime. That's my hypothesis, and the independent variable would be the full moon. But there'd be no way to manipulate it other than just when there is no full moon, measuring the difference.
Okay. Did you say increasing? Did you say increase in crime?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason for that, though, isn't there? It's a correlation. It's definitely not scientifically valid, and no, the cause would be man-made, because man thieving things is definitely man-made. So, yeah, you're not going to... Yeah. Anyway, the correlation is because it's brighter. You can see more. It's easier.
Well, they also say that a lot more... maybe this would be a natural occurring phenomenon, is that women go into labor as well on a full moon.
Yeah, could be an instinctual thing. You might, less likely to get lost or stumble around in the dark when you're trying to get to the hospital. If you, I don't know. I've no idea. But correlative only, I'm afraid, not scientifically validatable.
Right. If they would all go into labor, then everybody would a lot of people would start to have birthdays around a similar period. It's that moment in the month again that everybody's birthday is at.
Yeah, everyone had the same birthday. Okie doke. No science for the moon. Also, the phenomena kind of not related to the moon directly anyway. Asking what the cause of the moon is, isn't it? What you've got to start by knowing what that thing is to know what it's going to be causing. Something I ask my kid quite frequently because she's young and imaginative. It's like, what do you think that is? What do you think that is? That big circle in the sky? Not even that big, really, but you know what I mean. Compared to the other lights in the sky. Never get an answer.
And what did she say?
I don't know. It's the only answer she can give. I don't know. I don't know, Daddy. Neither do I, is my reply. I don't know either. I'd love to, though.
Two pictures in Master B, Nathan, on Lemaitre and Einstein.
Ah, yes. High priests of heliocentrism. Whoops. There we go.
So it was the 1927 Congress, and that's where Bohr and all these Schrodinger and Heisenberg and all these guys were at this conference, and so was a young Lemaitre. And if you go to the second slide, it's got a picture of him with Einstein, and the originator of the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, I don't know if the fundies realise that a lot of their nonsense comes from Jesuit priests. But it does! Isn't that nice? What was the first bit? Oh, here we go. It's just a picture of everyone at the conference.
Yeah, it gives some dates, and I think they had a couple of conferences. So one was 1933 and one was before, I think.
Excellent.
I found it interesting that they were there at the same time, all these characters, and then how that whole Big Bang grew out of that. It came out of Lemaitre. And then Einstein kind of deviated, or not deviated, but gravitated, if I can use that word, towards him, but argued with some of the other guys on other issues at the same conference.
Yeah, the people who were debunking him, probably. Yeah, so it doesn't seem like a very old, nonsense. Certainly the Big Bang you can tie down within a couple of lifespans. So it's very, very new. Which makes me think, well, if the majority of the Western world are currently so thoroughly indoctrinated with it, does that mean that we're at the start of a long and uphill battle to thoroughly indoctrinate people with it? Considering there's quite a lot of totalitarian authority being asserted on a lot of the Western world at the moment, you can only assume that might be the case, right? In other words, it's another form of control. We're all aware of the reasons why we've got this deception. But that control, maybe it's the beginning, as opposed to us saying, oh, well, people will appreciate the nonsense of an observably flat world being described as having antipodal people hanging off the bottom of where you're standing. That seems ludicrous to us. But maybe, like I say, we're at the beginning of an indoctrination process rather than at the end, because it does seem so very, very, very recent, right? Seems. Much as their fake history says otherwise.
Well, look what they're bringing in that wasn't in a few years ago.
Hold on, I've got two people. Hold on. Go. I had Eli first. Go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about that because it's so strange. It's almost like they want people to wake up to NASA lies. Putting out Michelle Dollar and this other guy. Who's that other guy? The poo-poo dude. And the things that they say is just easily debunkable. And it's like maybe they want us to reach a high fever pitch so they can concede to some other controlled environment that we unwittingly agree to. Like this flat earth model and these flat earth model pushers that seem to have no problems getting a larger audience.
Maybe. I mean, if you want to look to what they potentially could do, always look to the past. They say history repeats itself. Well, it's because psychopaths like to recycle. They're not very imaginative. So they'll reuse old, what would you call it? I was going to say regimes, but probably the wrong word. Methodologies, there you go, of exerting their control. Is that the correct way of saying it? asserting their control, maybe. Either way, they're going to just use
Exercising their control.
old plans and styles and techniques that have already been used. They just recycle them over and over again. So if you want to know what's going to happen in the future, look at some of the rhetoric of the past and you'll figure out what they're going to do next, because they'll just recycle something from days gone by. Again, we're in 2020 without naming anything specifically. What's currently happening has happened before. You don't have to look very far to find when they've done it before, and it's exactly the same. It amuses me when I point that out to people. But there we go. On the similar subject, my folks were expressing their concerns about the current state of affairs in terms of travel in the UK. While they were telling me all of this stuff, which I wasn't particularly interested in, I won't lie. I asked my mother what terror level we were at. What terror level are we at? She went, I don't know. I said, why not? Shouldn't you be terrified? Shouldn't you know how terrified to be? It's important, this stuff, right? Well, she said, well, it's not in the news. I said, well, what would make you know what terror level it was? Well, if it was in the news. They're not too concerned about the terror level right now, right? How interesting.
Weird. So it's not time to panic yet. It's just time to build a lot of tension, get very stressed out from all the double speak nonsense everywhere, and then wait until you get the start signal from the media. Now it's time to panic.
Yeah, exactly. People will take their cues from whatever they're told to take their cues from. People are very obedient and subservient and fickle. So, generally speaking, your average norm is very easy to manipulate. And there might be a certain member of my audience, or a few, that hear what I've just said and go, I better look up the terror level. I better be concerned about that. I forgot about that. That's something I need to be worried about.
Oh, dear.
Normies do amuse me, though. It is funny. They're just being manipulated with fear. That's all it is. Very powerful tool, though, right?
Well, it preoccupies a lot.
Yeah.
Well, back when 9/11 just happened, I was also like, oh, the DEFCON and emergency level. Yeah, because I believed it. So I was worried about it. And it distracted me a lot. A whole lot from everything else that I was doing. Or basically not doing at that point. Because of it. And that's what it's for. That's why people do hang on to fear porn and everything, because it distracts them from everything else.
And yeah, everyone's
they don't
talked
have
about
to realize
this stuff,
they
right?
can say, but this is important. So I got an important reason to distract myself from everything else in my life. That's a trick.
Well, I was certainly taught about this in school. It might have been when I was in a private school, but I was under the assumption that most people were acutely aware of propaganda and Bernays and psychological techniques that are used upon us, because I assume we were all taught it in school. Maybe I was just taught it in one particular school I went to, but were we not all taught what propaganda is? Just
yes.
Pop quiz for the panel. In school, were you taught about propaganda?
Yes, I was.
Anybody else?
The problem with propaganda is that at some point it can be just too good. And then even if you start out realizing that it probably is propaganda, you want it to be real. And that's the really strong propaganda that is played into the natural need that is predicted to arrive in the people in response to the situation presented.
Yeah, Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, right? Go on, Eli.
I was just going to say, I guess I was kind of taught about propaganda, but it was always set up so as I would be on the appropriate side before they would point out the propaganda of the other side that is very icky and I shouldn't think about.
In itself, propaganda. In other words, what you're saying is you were told about the nasty Germans and how they used propaganda against their people and how bad that was, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but again, in and of itself, propaganda in the education, but yes, that's correct.
Yeah, it's often thought of as if it's going to be obviously evil.
Yeah.
Well, It's like a child story example of something that is real, but not the real. So it's like a toy version of evil to basically give kids kind of a hint as to what it is from a very simplistic standpoint, from a very simplistic view, when in reality, the covert nature of evil is just mind-boggling sometimes, very confusing. Well, you can't really teach a child that. They'll just panic, right? But the problem is that if you just go with that typical narrative of what evil is, and then you really start to believe it as real and not just as a kid's toy, then eventually the real evil might slip you by because it's not overt enough. It's a very tricky thing.
You've led me beautifully. Slip you by. You were in the Ballbusters chat yesterday, Alwyn, right, when I posted this image? Put it up for the audience. The image from the third Matrix movie. So I was watching I was watching a documentary about the new Matrix movie, and obviously they're referencing various what they would call like historical or lore-based narratives within the film. And the image that's on screen now is actually from the Machine City, and it's viewed by Neo, and he's blind. Now this rolled by on my iPad, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, my God, this is absolutely riddled with subliminal messages. Now, subliminal embeds of horror faces and scary faces and death masks and scary animals bearing teeth. It's just absolutely riddled. And I was like, I've never seen an image with so many subliminals layered upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. And I just thought, man, I have to share this with the guys in Ballbusters. So I did. So I shared this image, and then I was like, okay, before I show my little terrible circles around some of the subliminals, I'll just explain something to the audience. Let's just see if I can get this a little bit bigger while I'm doing this. So, any subliminal will work is it works at varying distances. So it's not just the case that you'll just see it immediately pop out at you. You have to look at varying different distances. There you go. There's a bit bigger image so we can look at it in a bit more detail. But I'll stick up my circles around some of the scary, horrible faces, and then take your time in the aftermath. Maybe pause it if you're watching this on a pre-recorded bit or an uncut and after show or whatever. But just look at it at varying distances, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'll flick between the images without the circles on so you can see what it looks like au naturel, and then I'll stick them up with the circles just so you can get a nice example. I also did one pretty beautiful close-up of this scary looking dude. Let's see if I can get this looking a little bit better as well. I might actually zoom out to the normal view just so you can see this dude. A scary looking guy with his teeth and eyes screaming out of you from the Machine City when it's on fire, viewed by Neo with his blind eyes. So I just thought that was something I'd quite like to share. I haven't talked about subliminal messages for quite a long time, but it's something that still fascinates me to this day. But this one was a particularly epic sequence with the amount of layers of subliminals in it. It was just unreal. You know, I've seen a few in Disney covers on DVDs and stuff, but basically this entire image, let's go back to the main image, this entire image is nothing but one massively ladled subliminal. That's all it is. Very cool. But it's just there to scare you. That's the whole point. At a subconscious level, when you're looking at something like this, it induces fear. That's the whole point.
So is this specific image from a scene in the Matrix Revolutions?
Yes.
From that?
Yeah, when he gets to the Machine City and he stands on the precipice of the Machine City with blind eyes tied up, and he can see the electricity running along the pipes so he can get to that opening. When he actually overlooks the city with a bandana tied around his eyes and pads on his eyes, that's what he sees. It cuts to him looking at it, then it cuts to his view, and it rolls for about 3 seconds. Should I dare to play it? Will I just get copyright strikes? Probably.
No, don't play it.
Well, I'll just get to the section where it actually plays so you can see just that 3-second clip. I'll just play it once more so you can see how long it's on screen for. About here-ish somewhere. There we go. That's how long you get. It's very, very short. Just one more time. There.
Right, so they quickly show you a giant detailed painting in just a few seconds.
Yeah,
There's no way that anybody in those few seconds the first time they see it can process any of it.
No, but
except for emotionally, they might get the sense of it, the feeling, and that's probably the idea behind it. Because hey, Neo was just blinded, you
Sure.
know.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's
you get-
supposed to be terrifying to him.
Well, it shows
going
him
there,
behind.
so-
The previous shot is him behind with it just looking black and like a city. So it then very quickly cuts to his view because they've already prefaced it by showing him finding his way while blind with the view that he gets. So you get an idea that it's his view before they show that shot. But prior to it, you just get a couple of snippets of what it looks like in reality. Then when you get that overwhelming bright shot, it's obviously much brighter than the contrasting dark shot of what it looks like in reality. So it's kind of overwhelming. But within that 3 seconds, you're bombarded with subliminal messages, so that you're in you're in that fight or flight mode going into that scene. So there's obviously cinematic intentions behind doing it in that way and layering it with subliminals. But like I say, I've just never seen one with so many and with such a short sequence, and moving as well. There was a whole plethora of things that made that particular sequence of subliminals unique. Wow, there's a lot of tongue-twisting words. Really?
I was going to share that growing up in the era I did, it was always the Cold War and the Russians, and prior to that, it was obviously the World War II. So all the propaganda from each country was aimed at its people for specific reasons. So the Japanese would have their propaganda, the Germans theirs, the Americans theirs, the Russians theirs. Some of it was true, but mixed with all the other stuff, one big lie.
Yeah, that's the bit they don't tell you. That propaganda is 90%, if not more, real truth, easy to verify. And the propaganda part is normally only a very small percentage, weaved in with the truth.
Right. Or the most effective propaganda even is to just leave out things that are not inconvenient for the train of thought that they want the people to take within the context they're presenting. So they'll just present real information, then leave details out completely, even though somebody might, in the middle of it, confront them with it. Just ignore it. Ignore certain true parts to solidify the narrative in a certain railroad. That's also propaganda.
Yeah,
Very sneaky.
absolutely. But you're saying biased reporting. Yeah, that's a form of propaganda, no doubt.
It's been used to no end. It's one of the first things I recognized from the news, even when I was younger. Like, why don't they say this? Why aren't they bringing attention to what's happening over there, which is obviously involved? That sort of thing.
Guns of Navarone RMP says, actually, NASA steals 60 million, I think it's now more than that, a day from American taxpayers, and in return they spend 30 million a month on FX, actors, propaganda, advertising, media, etc. I think that was in response to, do they claim it's actually a sky vacuum? No, they spend a lot of money on a lot of visual effects to convince you that people on Highwire are actually up in a fake place that violates natural law. Yep, they need the people to think that there's this thing called orbits, right? A tin can falling around a presupposed spherical surface at a given rate. What is it, 17,500 miles per hour? Their orbital falling speed around a presupposed spherical Earth. Well, they need that notion to be very much held by the general populace. That Earth's a sphere and things fall around
it. As a science fiction concept, it's very viable in the face of all the other extremities. If you believe the Earth is a globe in an outer space vacuum and all that, and there's a sun-burning gas ball, then I think an orbit is not that far of a stretch, really, in the face of all that. Would you say?
In the model, yeah, I completely agree. It's a necessity in the heliocentric worldview, but it doesn't make it real. That's the bottom line, right?
No, but what I specifically meant is that in the face of the extremities, the other extremities, the concept of an orbit is not that far, is not that how do you say, not that surreal compared to some other
Oh, I see what you mean.
problematic issues.
Yeah. Compared to the idea that the sky is a vacuum, the idea that stuff's falling around rocks, you kind of go, well, that's not quite as absurd, really. It is still way up there, though, in my view, Arwin.
Well, in reality, yes.
I'd put it way
Well,
up
in
there.
reality,
I see what
you can't. Go ahead, Elijah.
I see what you mean, Arwin. Because I mean, people don't say it enough, but it's like you got water in a vacuum, you got air in a vacuum, but even worse, they tell you that the sun is a burning ball of gas in a vacuum. And then there are other planets that are just gas in a vacuum. Like, that's insane. So the orbiting is like the easiest pill to swallow, I guess, if you're gonna be going into believing things.
Exactly. It's just a simple mechanical conclusion. Like, oh, this happens.
Just
And
never,
hey,
ever
it's
observed
supposed to
ever.
be the same effect that causes the moon to spin around the Earth, right? So
No, no. They get the moon to be presumably assumed to be falling around in the same presupposition of an orbit. So no, they have the moon orbiting by presupposition, but it's not a way of explaining it, nor is it some simple explanation for the fact that the sun and moon move over my head in no way implies that they're falling around a spherical surface. That's just by presupposition and implication.
yeah.
Well, there we go. With that, I'll say if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Programming streams, then stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. A huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you joined as a member, smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, and all that good stuff. Be sure to check out nathanoakley.com and the Flat Earth Debate Forum to keep up to date with the community debate. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either Programming stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Christmas week, who knows?
Oh, right. That's true.
Well, again, let's finish. Let's stay on the topic we were on before the show finished. So when they start off with the falsehood, the shape of the Earth, no R value, as we know, then everything else has to build on the falsehood that it has an R value, and then we're orbiting around the sun and blah blah blah, and then next thing you know, this is orbiting about that, but it all falls apart because the first premise is wrong. It was never factual that the Earth was a sphere with a radius. So that's why it falls apart. The further they go out and wherever they are now with their imaginings, just trace it back to the main thing. If we're not a sphere, we're not rotating, and we're not having an R value, then all of it falls apart.
Yeah, that's what we said in the pre-show, basically, yeah. Without the R value, they've got absolutely nothing to claim that they're on a sphere.
And without the R value, all of these add-ons fall apart. With the R value in their imagination, because they still believe the lie, these things have to be this way. There have to be orbits. There has to, all these other things fit that outer space crap.
Right. Yeah, it's the start of the web of lies, is what you're saying. It's the premise that all of their assertions are based on.
Yeah. Well, it's a deception. We're warned specifically through Scripture. Be not be deceived. Be not be deceived. It's warning us all the time. Don't be deceived. Well, what's the warning there for? Well, there's a lot of deception going on.
Hey, Brian. Hey, Adam.
Indeed. Hello, both.
Hey, Nathan. Hey,
Morning,
Alan.
guys.
Hey, everybody.
Hey guys, happy Monday.
Hey, Adam.
Hi, bro.
Good weekend?
You're late.
Oh, no, they were in chat.
That is right.
Yeah,
Are you talking to me or Adam?
You what, mate?
Nathan asked, did you have a good weekend? I think he was talking to you and Adam.
Well, I think you all know I didn't. So, but other than that,
Yes, there was a
interesting
hint.
point on that space stuff, Nathan. I was just having a quick read. That's what I put in chat. There's nothing. You'd think it'd be something to put your name to, wouldn't you? I'm the one that first postulated that it was this. I saw quite a few bits of stuff, but there's nothing direct. It kind of jumps from discussing that nature abhors a vacuum, discussion that there might not be something, or that I think Robert Hutt suggests there might be an end to atmospheric pressure, but without, I think, postulating it like that. And then suddenly you get to reset time of the late 1900s, where this postulation by people, what was his name? Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, talking about why he thinks rockets would work in a vacuum and postulating maths for that, for space travel. So you seem to go from this one area where it's not even really directly addressed in terms of it being space, vacuums, to then it suddenly being necessary to demonstrate how rockets can work in a vacuum.
Right. So it's from discussing it or postulating about it vaguely and describing how you might not have one, almost, to it's our now assumption that it is a vacuum. Let's figure out how things work in it.
Yeah. I mean, if you look historically, if you look at the 1700 stuff, they're trying to figure out what a vacuum is. So you've got those, they're discussing a vacuum as a force, the force of a vacuum, because they've got the things where you might have seen the old pictures where the two metal domes they put together create a vacuum inside and use fleets of horses to demonstrate you can't pull these two things apart because of the power of the vacuum. So it's discussed in the 1700s as a concept of wonderment. And it's at this point that they're considering whether the air has substance to it. Do you know what I mean? So the concept of gases and that with Hawke are starting to form, but the full concept of air and then vacuum. So I think at that time it would be very strange if, viewing vacuums as having forces. And they talk about in barometers, how a barometer works, the sucking power to pull up the mercury up the tube. So they're still not fully understanding air pressure. So I don't think they'd be painting it as a medium for everything to exist in, because they're talking about it being powerful. But it's as much as I could find really in that.
So it was grounded more into Newtonian thinking back then, because Newton did not really account for the reality of gas pressure in his mechanics either. So that would explain.
Well, that makes sense.
Gases.
Well, it's because they haven't figured it out yet, which is, that's fine. He's not going to account for something if he doesn't know about it. You don't know what you don't know. So we can't really hold that against Newton. But it's an interesting point from Arwin and from Adam. I mean, so there's a transition, it seems, around that sort of time when they go from not knowing a great deal about air pressure to assuming the sky is a vacuum and how rockets would work in it. That's a big leap.
Yeah, the Torricelli bloke's the one that's among his works of designs for rockets, thrusters, boosters, space stations, for exiting a spaceship into the vacuum of space. So that's a citation from Wiki about this guy, and he's what's his timeline? 1857 to 1935. So he's, like I say, at the turn of the century where he's doing all of this. But again, you see, you've gone from that Jules Verne type point, Nathan. Do you see what I mean? Where you suddenly get this Victorian concept of being able to travel to the moon. I don't think up until then, I read something like in terms of Hawke and that, them considering even the stars were part of the Earth. So they're not viewing the stars as distant things. They're viewing the stars as part of the atmosphere, probably with a biblical cosmology in mind. They're not stepped out of that. Later, I think, as you get to Victorian stuff.
Well, it's super, super recent. We've got Werner von Braun reading something in a novel and then reifying it into existence with these Chinese-based rockets.
No, that's not correct. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Because in both the calculation of little g and big G, which is universal gravitational constant, little g is from Charles Vernon Boyle's, which is from the late 1800s, and a vacuum is part of his calculation of the 9.8 meters per second squared. And then Einstein used the speed of light as part of his theory of general relativity, which is also claimed to be light moving through a vacuum.
Hey, QE.
So those claims are in there.
Any idea who
QE knows?
I was just going to ask him. Any idea who invented space?
I have no idea.
Trying to figure out the timeline. Well, thank you for the correction, Brian. Obviously, I don't know what I don't know either. So,
Are you saying who invented the vacuum of space?
Yeah, where did we go from? So Adam's got to the point where they're looking at what vacuums are, and they've got two horses tied to two like glass bowls that are attached together with the air sucked out, and they're showing how you can yank it and it won't come apart. The force that is the vacuum in this. Did you say this was late 1800s, Adam?
No, this is mid 1700s where they're discussing the force of a vacuum and doing those kind of, like I said, the metal spheres, putting them together with a vacuum and demonstrating the power, and discussing the sucking action of a vacuum as it pulls the.
Fine. So if they're only
1670s and stuff like that,
they're only studying the effects of it. So 500 years ago, by this example, then you can naturally infer that they haven't already deduced that the sky is that, because they're only just looking at it, right?
Yeah.
So from there,
I said they were only discussing vacuums there. There's very little link. There's nothing. Even when you go to the site, they're not putting the two together in that directly. Do you know what I mean? They're discussing the nature of gas. Like I said, at the 1700s, they're discussing that air does have substance. So to be at that stage, to be postulating, like I said, but I still think they're within biblical cosmology that, as they talk about it. And who was it? Is Micrographia. Robert Hooke's Micrographia. He talks about it. And like I said, talks about it, the stars being set within there. So they're still biblical. So I don't think at this point, even if they're exploring the concept of space, they're the concept of a vacuum, and also that there could be ability to go from here to those lights in the skies, that they're putting the two together, that powerful vacuum. It would seem nonsensical because they're discovering the vacuum and it's wonderment, and they're attributing forces to it. So it would be odd to make that link to say, oh, and that's what fills the gap between here and the moon or whatever. There was nothing like that in terms of what I could see.
They need it to be a vacuum because little g and big G, via the speed of light, both have vacuum within the calculations.
It's accepted by that time, though, isn't it? By the time Einstein's got it, it's not even a point of debate, is it, or conjecture? It is a vacuum, and
yeah, but what sticks people to a rotating sphere?
Yeah, but what we're trying to find, Brian, is the transition point, right? So you're right, and what Adam's saying is by that stage, the assumption, the presupposition of a sky vacuum is already established. So it's not even pondered by those people when they take little g or big G or whatever else it is they're using, because it's already established. So what point was it? Somebody says, the sky is actually a vacuum, by the way. When does that happen?
Well, that happens somewhere after the Principia, because they need the sky to be a vacuum for gravity to exist. So sometime between the Principia and Charles Vernon Boyce, because they need it to be a vacuum for gravity to for a start with the force of gravity, with the calculation by Charles Vernon Boyce, and then afterwards, like obviously with the speed of light as well, which wasn't Einstein, it was before Einstein. So and the speed of light originally, the first step is the belief that Kepler's analemma was correct, which is from I think 1600s. But so this whole idea of a vacuum, that if they don't have vacuum, they don't have gravity, we're not sticking to a sphere. They had to pre-assume a vacuum because we are on a sphere and gravity is real and we are stuck to it. That's what I'm trying to say.
I see.
When was the first time it was mentioned? Did you track that back? I got 1692.
What have you got in 1692?
From Dr. Richard Bentley to Isaac Newton's letter to Bentley.
And what's it say?
It says that gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter so that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum. Remember, I outlined this one day when I was reading this because it didn't hit me until I was on the show and reading it, and I said, wonder where he got that vacuum from. So, it says it right there.
Now,
okay, that narrows it right down then. So,
no, because is that implying he's not, when he's talking there, is he talking about space, or is he implying that gravitation is through a vacuum? So there's no medium that's pulling the things together, that it's through a vacuum, or is he attributing vacuum as the thing that sits above the sky? That's
what? No, he's talking about the vacuum of space in this.
I'll read it again, John. We'll steer it.
All right. That gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter so that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum without the mediation of anything else, by and through which their action and force may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great an absurdity that I believe no man, you know what the deal is.
Yeah. Right. So if he is talking planetary motions there, because if he is, then the vacuum's right. If he's not, then...
No, I don't think he is. It doesn't. He's talking about mechanical properties. That's what I can derive from what he just said.
Yeah,
purely mechanical, like emphasizing even through a vacuum, not the vacuum.
Yeah, but is he broadly talking about the nature of reality in its entirety? Therefore, that assertion. I mean, maybe this is a point that was confused when this, was being pondered, and the difference between someone saying, well, in a vacuum, i.e. in isolation, there would be this force acting between the two bodies, or is he broadly speaking about the nature of everything? And we still haven't tied it down, and Arwen's right. It's not saying the vacuum, he's saying a vacuum.
Nah, I disagree. He's definitely talking about the vacuum.
He says a vacuum.
Yeah, I don't care. He's talking about a vacuum as the vacuum of space. He's talking about gravity and the bodies in the celestial sphere. Guaranteed.
Okay, fine. If it's that broad, then yes, he is. He's talking about the vacuum of the sky. If it's that broad, the context of the discussion.
Right. Otherwise,
he is.
The Principia is talking about planetary motion, isn't it? It's Kepler's stuff. So again, though, it's not specific. Now, for such a thing, a fundamental thing, it's there then. He's just talking as if it's implied, as if it is just matter of fact already then in 17.
Yeah. Sam's Meat Market, you kill him, we'll chill him.
But so your question still stands then. So where did he get that from?
That's what I said back when I read it.
And it still stands. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, maybe it wasn't something they discussed in secret. Maybe the idea of the outer space vacuum was an occult concept that they did not like to openly discuss yet. Maybe
I think I went
that
searching.
word has never been revealed, even potentially.
I
Except
think I went searching for it one time, and I said, heck with it. Got on to something else.
Yeah, but you see, technically they never actually claimed a vacuum, a perfect vacuum. They can always claim that they never actually claim that. They only
What, a
claim
perfect?
NASA. Yeah.
What do you mean? Yeah, perfect vacuum has nothing. You're never going to get a perfect vacuum. They wouldn't have claimed that anyway.
Yeah, but that's the argument that the ballers will make. But NASA do claim 10 to the minus 17 tour, don't they?
Yeah, that's a stupid argument. It's a real clumsy red herring fallacy. Perfect vacuum, whether that's just to get you off. You're on a tangent. They're idiots.
Oh, I know that, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about mainstream can mess with their figures and their calculations because there's no such thing as a perfect vacuum. So they can say they never actually, when they say vacuum, they never really meant an actual vacuum. They just meant a kind of a lower pressure. Do you understand what I mean? This is how they can mess with
I know
it
what you're
over time.
driving at. You're saying that at trench level they can spin the rhetoric. That's what you're saying.
Sorry, Nathan, I missed that.
You're saying they can spin it, and you're right.
Yes.
That's all they do, though. That's all we
Not
experience.
really. I mean, because regardless of what they say these things are in, the distances are wrong because R is not there. So, I mean, they're trapped either way. Well, this stuff is in a vacuum with these distances based on these calculations. No.
How'd we get here?
We're just trying to figure out why the automatic assumption of a sky vacuum starts, and we've gone as far back as we can, as far as we can tell, and what we get is somebody assuming a vacuum. You know,
I've got a nice quote here from Descartes. Descartes set out to replace the Aristotelian worldview with a theory about space and motion as determined by natural laws. In other words, he sought a metaphysical foundation or a mechanical explanation for his theories about matter and motion. Cartesian space was Euclidean in structure, infinite, uniform, and flat. It was defined as that which contained matter. Conversely, matter, by definition, had a spatial extension, so that there was no such thing as empty space. That's Descartes' thinking there. So,
wow, I'd never
When
heard
was that?
I've never heard that.
I'm just going to look up the date of
That was
Descartes.
great. That was great from Descartes. I think therefore I am
1629 to 1649. So 16. So it's the same time again. So there's all these different thinkings, isn't there? There's nothing.
Can you read that
It's
again?
probably
That was
where we're coming up with the
excellent.
concept of nothing. Yet Descartes saying there can't be a concept of nothing.
Yeah, he's saying you can't have gas pressure without a container, and he's saying it's a violation of natural law. That was an excellent little clip. Can you read it again?
Yeah. Descartes set out to replace the Aristotelian worldview with a theory about space and motion as determined by natural laws. In other words, he sought a metaphysical foundation or a mechanical explanation for his theories about matter and motion. Cartesian space was Euclidean in structure, infinite, uniform, and flat. It was defined as that which contained matter. Conversely, matter, by definition, had a spatial extension, so that there was no such thing as empty space.
Descartes, awesome. First time I've heard that. That's great.
But then John's ruined it because he's quite clearly talking within the Principia about planetary motion. So the space has to be the space of space that he's talking about. I don't disagree with that.
Wait a second. Let's move back. The Principia. It's the Principia.
Principia. Yeah.
Ain't no Principia.
Okay, this moot point.
We need to research that after we find out who conjured the vacuum of space.
That's much more important.
That's a good point.
It's one of those that if you can postulate that this stuff, obviously letters aside, because that's definitely a primary source, but a lot of the stuff is unbackable, you know, in terms of its validity. It could just be all narrative. It could just all be made up, and this particular aspect of the narrative just hasn't been bothered to be invented.
I'm after spotting something here from Wikipedia out of space, right? The Italian scientist Galileo Galilei knew that air had mass and so was subject to gravity. There you go, in 1640. He has demonstrated an established force resisted the formation of a vacuum. So vacuum is the whole vacuum thing is connected directly to gravity, I think. They I don't think I know. They have to have a vacuum because they have to be able to claim that air is being kept here. Vacuum is part of all their calculations, gravity calculations. Little g vacuum is in there. Everything is because what I'm trying to say is they have to have space and they have to have it be a vacuum.
This just sounds like a bit of an inserted narrative.
Good.
I mean, this sounds like just an inserted narrative when it comes to Galileo. I mean, you've got people who are studying, as Adam describes it, the forces. I'm much more inclined to believe that, as I've seen photographs of it. Nah, it might not be true, but I've seen photographs of it, so I'm thinking, okay, that's more likely to be true. But yet, predating that, you've got people postulating it like Galileo, centuries prior. Makes no sense. Am I missing something?
Oh yeah,
the timeline doesn't add up.
I
was just saying the timeline doesn't add up. Does anybody disagree with me?
No, I totally agree.
It's totally what I agree, Nathan.
It's a missing link.
Yeah.
I'm very curious now.
Yeah, so a missing link goes between one link and the other. It doesn't come centuries prior, does it? So it makes no sense.
No, the point I was making with the Galileo thing is they're claiming it back at Galileo's time. That's what, gravity itself was added into Kepler's Analemma. That was added to Kepler's Analemma after Kepler.
So we're talking about people diddling with the story as it's progressed then, in bits inserted here and there. Of course, why wouldn't that be the case? It's a massive lie. Why am I even surprised?
Well, when did Kepler live?
I'll find out there now.
Nathan, go to Master V. I just put a link. I just typed in when the humans first discovered space was a vacuum, and there's a bunch of people giving their points.
Yeah, I've got it up.
And they're citing things, so there's a lot there. You just need to scroll
this is
down.
Just a Quora blog. Come on.
No, but they have links in there, and you can follow those.
Yeah.
I did, and it took me to two guys, and I read that. Then I just found this one, and it went to what John said with Principia. So they got a bunch of things aimed at this.
Principia? The Principia.
That's
you mean
the
Principia?
Principia.
If I could just, can I bring this to an end?
Yes.
Press play. You ready? Can I share?
Yeah, you're sharing. Yeah, hide that.
Mathematica. They say it wrong. There's another one. I got another one for you. I'm gonna beat that to death. That's hard. That's hogwash.
Hogwash because
maybe
you're
I'm
saying
right.
it different.
So I'm right. I'm in the middle.
Just audible for the audience, Adam, but I heard it.
I'll stop.
Okay, so it's got a really,
Johannes
really...
Kepler was born in 1571 and died in 1630. That's what they have down here on Google. So
When did he come up with his nonsense?
1 second, I'll come back to you on that.
Let's get down to brass tacks here.
Weren't the first globes made in the 1600s too? Like the actual globe in a classroom?
Yeah, 1492 was the first globe.
Yeah,
claimed.
but would you call that which they've claimed is the first ever globe? It's a bit like the Mappa Mundi in the respect that it's like a football, isn't it? A bit of leather. I'm saying that at least the Mappa Mundi has got, it's it's nicely preserved and obviously looks like a map from a similar time.
Done a fair bit of work on that bloody thing.
That's true. Well, why not do the same work on the globe that's from the same period? Because it just, to me, with the pictures, I've not seen it in the person unlike the map of Monday, but it just looks like a tatty piece of crap. Am I wrong? Why wouldn't you preserve that to the nth degree also? Anyway, maybe you're right. Maybe 1600s is where their narrative has got it all placed as the beginning point.
Are you talking about the globe, Nathan?
Yeah.
The first globe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like an old World War II football. When I first looked at it in 2016, but last year I looked at it and it's a very elaborate thing, nothing like a football now. But it was just like a brown leather football with some patches on it back 4 years ago.
Which is perfectly in keeping with what they do for maps. So it's not like I'm knocking it for that. I'm just saying that from what I saw, I'll have to look at it again. Maybe it is far more detailed than I remember. Not that it matters.
Well, the detail was there beforehand. They've just transposed it onto that shape, haven't they? Like around that time, they get all sorts of maps, don't you? None of them. They use latitude and longitude, but they're very creative in plotting stuff. So you'll get like the heart map but like we've got now, but they're just using those shapes and giving different longitude, latitude. There's the Jester's face map as well, isn't there? That they plot them in, but to keep the longitude, latitude lines, but within the confines of the shape they use. So they're mucking around with all sorts of stuff with the. And this is again, it's a twist to history, isn't it? Where have they got all this latitude, longitude knowledge from? So that they've got all these bits of maps that do add up, and you can place them where they want. That's the bit that don't make sense. The gathering of all that data that just appears.
Maybe we'll get some feedback from the audience when this goes out tomorrow.
That's what I was going to say. Just leave it to the research arm out there. Somebody will find it.
It was just most curious, John. You know, you think, oh, who discovered space? It is, yeah, or who first said above the sky is a vacuum on your way to, you know what I mean? Surely somebody would want the kudos of that.
Yeah.
First claim.
Well, that doesn't make sense in the timeline either, does it? Because all of those narratives in terms of those declarations would come from the 40s, 50s, 60s. That's where they're all actually making those declarations, isn't it?
It's required in the model, though. This is Paul on the Discord, because you can't have massive bodies flowing through kind of substance. Because imagine it's required in the model.
Well, that's what Brian was saying. So by the time Einstein arrives, it's a necessary prerequisite that the gaps between bodies are a vacuum for Einstein's calculations. So it's just a fact now. It's still not been proven yet because nobody's gone up there yet for another 30, 40 years, have they, to get that high to prove it. But it's just an accepted fact by the time Einstein's postulating his stuff that it is. And as Brian says, it has to be, otherwise his maths don't work.
I mean, if we accept that as the narrative to date, then Mark Sargent's assessment of the situation is spot on then. Up until that point, they didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. That's what we've said for for the entirety of this show, right? So, at some point, they figured out that they were wrong. Like I say,
QE. Sorry, Nathan, I thought you. Sorry, I thought you were finished.
I was just going to say, until that point, if we're coming to the conclusion that we don't necessarily know where the transition from doesn't seem likely to, it's our assumption. We don't know where that transition precisely occurred, but we know that there's a transition, and then we've got maybe 400 years that transpires, and we don't, it's postulated and gets a little bit refined, but there comes a point where they've actually got to go up and examine what the sky is, and they have done that. But at that point, they figure out they're wrong. Because before then, who's gone up there, right? So who's going to know that that's not the case? And it's not forgivable that they've made the assumptions. It's just an assumption. It's just a philosophy. You can justify it however you like. But at some point, someone's actually got to go up and check. And they did in the 60s and 50s.
Well, I still claim, and I have a video coming that will back it up to a point, that it all started with numerologists. I'm not saying Pythagoras existed, that's just the person they put out there as being this master numerologist, but it starts with numerology. The whole globe model starts with that. But that doesn't really matter anyway, does it?
All right.
Yeah, you're gonna
before
have
you
to
go,
expand-
you need to get. Before you go, you need to put Principia Mathematica pronunciation in there on screen.
Yes,
Have you posted
indeed.
it?
I put in Master B.
You didn't like my porcupine version?
For QE, Kepler's laws of planetary motion between 1609 and 1619. So we can do that 10-year period from 1609 to 1619. That's what.
Yeah, so that was well before gravity.
Yeah, well before gravity.
I know that because a baller claimed that Kepler used Newton's law. I remember that. That's why I said pull it up.
Principia Mathematica.
Say it again.
Got Chinese girl saying it.
Principia Mathematica.
He's getting muted by Adam.
Good one, Adam.
Say it again.
Principia Mathematica.
Of tomato, is. Thank you.
Tomato.
Now we're all clear.
For a sauce.
Hold on. Now we're all clear that it's Principia. Can we move on?
Well, what language is it in? Is it Latin?
Well, yeah, it's written in Latin, isn't it?
Well, Nathan, you know a lot of Spanish.
Latin? I thought it was Swahili.
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 Where's Flatsoid when you need him?
Hey, did you catch that rumpus double speaking numpty stuff?
No, you sent me a clip, but I haven't been on the computer to actually listen to it. Do you want me to play it?
Yeah.
Okay, was it in Ballbusters or was it to me personally? I think it might have been to me personally, eh? Yeah, it is. Here we
I
go.
put it everywhere.
Yeah, me either. I didn't get to listen.
Okay, let's have a listen. It's doing its work.
The double speaking Dunning-Kruger rumpus, December 20th, 2020.
But that's what gives you. That's what the GPS gives you. It gives you your elevation with respect to this, not the center of the Earth, which some people say.
Some people? You mean like you?
Because the definition of elevation on a globe model is the distance from the center of the Earth. He then tries to make a point that some people have said that elevation is relative to the center of the Earth.
Yeah, you.
Because the definition of elevation on a globe model is the distance from the center of the Earth. It's all relative to this geoid, which does include the bulge, and that's what we mean by elevation. It's not relative to the center of the Earth. When we talk about elevation, it's relative to the ellipsoid. Because the definition of elevation on a globe model is the distance from the center of the Earth. It's all relative to this geoid, which does include the bulge, and that's what we mean by elevation. It's not relative to the center of the Earth. When we talk about elevation, it's relative to the ellipsoid. Because the definition of elevation on a globe model is the distance from the center of the Earth. It's all relative to this geoid, which does include the bulge, and that's what we mean by elevation. It's not relative to the center of the Earth. Because the definition of elevation on a globe model is the distance from the center of the Earth, and that's what we mean by elevation. It's not relative to the center of the Earth. Because the definition of elevation on a globe model is the distance from the center of the Earth.
Absolutely epic.
Is he on drugs, man?
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's typical
No,
rumpus.
he's correcting himself. That's what he's doing now.
But
And
it's worse. Like, he's correcting himself, but he says, I don't know who's ever said that. When it's him who said that. And he always says that.
Not anymore.
Once
That's what-
Rumpus stops to repeatedly say something, that means he's never said it after that point.
But just the main point in that is what he's now saying is that it's the distance to the center of an Earth on a model that he presupposes in the form of a geoid model. That's what gives you the center of the Earth in the geoid model. What's that got to do with the physicality of the nature we live in? You're assuming that the center of Earth is based on a model. That's what he's telling you. I assume the geoid represents the Earth. Really? That's nice. And what's the geoid? This little squashed Earth thing that you've got in your models that they use as datums and reference points to presuppose that the Earth is spherical before they measure it flat. That geoid. Oh wow, so you assume a geoid? Well, isn't that just begging the question there, Rumpus? You assume the centre of Earth is based on a geoid? I assume that the centre of Earth is based on this model, I assume. Wow, that's proving a lot. Shock horror.
Nathan, didn't we start the show this way when I said Eratosthenes had a 7.2 degree measurement from the center of the Earth to show him the shadows between Cyan and Alexandria?
Yeah, in Wiki it even disclaims it. It says they had to assume the Earth was a sphere. And I remember me attacking Gary Awesome because he used that exact example. And when he went and read it out, he even read it from Wiki. They had to assume they're on a sphere. And I'm like, that's my argument, you dick.
Well, maybe he read it from Dicky instead of Wiki.
Yeah, that's what Wiki is.
What Rumpus is talking about there is the elevation you get off of Google Earth. Because what they do is they take the 3D Cartesian coordinates, and to convert them to a globe, they convert the 2D to latitude and longitude, and then the elevation, which is the zenith, they convert that to height above the ellipsoid. That's how they make it work.
Yeah, and what's the zenith? The zenith is what you would measure as the point from the top above you down through your head to the ground. And they're saying that line points at an angle towards wherever the geoid says it points at an angle. Well, it's not pointing at an angle. If I drop a plumb line, it goes straight down. No. But on the geoid, it points out at an angle at England's point. Look, it's at this strange angle. What, in your model? Yeah, but my plumb line still goes straight down, doesn't it? And everything that's done within this general vicinity after you assume the zenith points at a weird angle on a globe, after that point, you're going to measure it all flat with plumb lines. But what, I assume the plumb isn't plumb? Yeah, screw you with your geoid.
Yeah, exactly. And by admitting that there, well, he didn't admit it, but by stating it, he actually is backing up the argument that QE made when you and QE did the show showing how Google Earth is a flat Earth model. Because the height above the geoid is no different than the height just above the ground or mean sea level anywhere. If you
Precisely.
know what I mean. So there's no difference.
Yeah, precisely. So if you've got the height of above a presupposed point when pointing at an angle to the point the geoid says you're pointing at, and you verse that with what's just the elevation versus the topology, there's no difference. So other than the presupposition that you've got a presupposed spherical Earth with you pointing a zenith that's actually plumb at a weird angle, what have they got? Nothing. And when you compare it to flat, what have they got? Well, nothing, because it's measured flat.
Yeah, it would work out exactly the same for someone in an airplane. Well, not for the airplane, the flying of the airplane, but as far as altitude goes, it would be exactly the same. Altitude is altitude above ground and mean sea level.
Yeah, the problem only occurs when you point out that you'd have to drop. That's QE's main point in that presentation. Where's the drop? Because at some point, for the plane, where you're saying there's no difference, well, how'd you get around that if you're a fundy? Well, you say that it's both angled up in its angle of attack to give it more lift or more efficient lift, while simultaneously having a non-force force that you can think of as a force pulling it down at a rate that's indiscernible to account for the drop that isn't there. So you're like, how is that an explanation? It's just not dropping, and there isn't any drop to drop around. If there was, it'd have to, and it doesn't. But what, you've got a non-force force that you can think of as a force that pulls it around without the pilot noticing? Wow, that's a candy, isn't it? Shame it's not a force, and it's a shame there's no drop.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what he's detailing there is basically can be seen as just a flat plane. It's going to work exactly the same. Now, airplane to go around an oblate spheroid would have to nose down and deal with a drop, but
careful. Not nose down. Nose down, no. Don't say nose down, that's just bad terminology. Say drop. Say nose down. They can get around that. And they have. I've had an argument about it many a time. Don't say nose down. Just trust me.
All right, yeah, okay. I've had it out with him a few times myself. I don't know what did they say to you about that?
It's just an avoidance of an argument you don't need to have that they'll throw up as a straw man if you say nose down. But if you say drop, then the plane would have to drop around that drop that's supposed to be there. What's drop? What drop? Why would it have to drop? Well, you claim there's 8 inches per mile squared of it.
Oh yeah, well, when I'm making that argument, when I'm making that argument, I just say the plane flies with the nose 1 to 3 degrees above horizontal, and if I just use the word drop after that. So I'm only saying nose down in this instance.
I understand. If you're qualifying it, then fair enough. Yeah, you're qualifying it, which means that you understand the pitfall, which is all I was trying to highlight.
Nathan, I got a picture of Master B. They always do any kind of measurement from a plane, and then they fold it up and take it to another spot and do it from there.
But the altimeter or the altimeter is like supposed to keep them level, right?
The horizontal, the watch call would keep them level. The gyroscope.
No, I mean, but it keeps them at a specific altitude, right? Because I was watching what's his name, Flat Earth Banjo's video just this morning. He has a new pilot's air video, and he's basically saying that it goes above positive and negative, which is why you need it, because the winds don't only go, west, east, but they also push the plane up and down as you have winds coming up and winds going down. I thought that was interesting. But you're not just descending, is the point.
No, it's more of a sine wave, kind of a small sine wave type thing, I think, is how it flies.
Sure, but the point is there's massive amounts of drop that should be accounted for, because that's what they say is an occurrence if we're on a sphere. The ground is dropping away from you at 8 inches per mile squared. There's a physical tangent point that would obscure the view of that drop into the distance. That's their claim. So the plane's got to drop. It's got to scrub off, whatever word you want to lose, the altitude as it goes forward. And it doesn't, because there isn't any. There's no drop.
Yeah, but when I said earlier on about the nose, they have to dip the nose below horizontal. That's true, because if they want to fly, let's say from London to Perth, then they have to. There is no way around it. They're ending up on their model 3/4 way upside down. So there's no way around it. Like if you're going to fly at all around a thing, a surface that's dropping away from you at magnitudes of curve below you, there's no way around it. You have to drop your nose below horizontal.
Right. To effectively invert the plane. So if you were looking at it from space, what you're saying is, as you flew around that spherical surface, by the time you land, you've got to have that plane inverted, antipodal to where it began. Well, therefore, it's got to have such a massive amount of drop on the journey, as would be expected on a surface that's dropping away from you. That would have to occur and doesn't. That's the bottom line, right, Brian?
Exactly, Nathan, exactly. The only argument they ever tried to make with me about that was that, they drop altitude by dropping power. But that doesn't change the physics of the situation. You can't fly with the plane either at exact horizontal or above horizontal and go around something that's dropping away below you, the opposite direction. This can't be done. It's a complete impossibility.
Adam did a presentation on this. He's got his first slide up. I don't know if you want to take the reins, Adam.
Yeah. Donks ago, this was with me, Paul, on the plane back in the day when we were looking at accelerometers and stuff. So this was a consequence of that. And as Brian says, planes fly in a particular manner. The direction, put simply, the direction that the nose is pointing is not the direction of travel. So you can see here the direction the nose is pointing, but the actual path vector that the plane takes is the yellow line, not the blue line. This is true of all stuff, big jets do about 2 to 3 degrees. So I just set out to just explore this and kind of take it. And I was quite geeky. I had two phones, one with the bubble app on, and the other I just filmed it so that I could retrospectively go back and take all these coordinates. What actually happened was, as Nathan says, it was flat. I won't go into too much more detail on that, but there was nothing. The data sat for a very long time, flat basically, sitting at a slight incline, never nosing down, and continued along for the hour that I filmed it. That middle part of the journey just stayed the same. Now, you guys talk about drop and stuff, and this was born out of the arguments of drop with ballers, because they'll argue that yes, over a 500-mile journey, you've got to deal with X amount of drop, but actually you can deal with it every mile, and you've only got 8 inches to deal with in terms of drop. So if after a mile you drop 8 inches, you're back at the same altitude. So you don't have this massive amount unless you deal with it at a cumulative point. But if you were guided by a altimeter, then there's very small movements you could negate for that. What you can't do is deal with the consequence of living on a ball if this is going off. Because if I look at the first one, as we go from here, as the plane flies from here to here, the direction of, we'll use the word gravity, is exactly the same. It's the same vector, relative to the person. It doesn't change. But on a ball, this relative vector would change at a rate of 0.009 degrees per kilometer. Okay, now, irrespective of your plane dropping slightly in altitude, so you stay the same height, the world is curling away underneath you whilst you continue on a straight line vector. So this is the kind of the net effect of what it would feel like if you see the plane staying straight. It's dropping to compensate for going around the ball a lot, but if you look at the different angle that is happening with regards to the orientation. So what would happen if you're on the plane? If this is the plane, and this is actually what's happening in terms of the orientation change, this is actually the net effect of what the person, you would feel like you're getting steeper and steeper and steeper because the orientation is bending away from you as you travel on your straight line vector. Okay, so that's the crux of it to me, unless, as Brian says, they nose down and adjust for the 0.009 degrees, which if you were on a ball you would be accumulating, and you cannot get rid of without reorientating the plane. That is not something you can get out of. Whereas I do think there's slight excuses for drop. You can give apologetics for it.
So you're saying, in summary, that you can just about account for the drop, but you can't account for the fact that they would have to end the plane inverted, antipodal from where it began.
Yes, that's the crux. If you don't reorientate the plane, you can't get past that. You can get past, like say, that dealing with the drop in a non-cumulative manner all the way through the flight, but that does not change the fact that if you've not nosed down, this nonsense happens. And obviously the consequence is the plane would have to nose down to realign to keep you flying at the same angle in your seat, the same incline. That doesn't happen. There isn't ever nosing down.
Yeah, wait a second. You can't get away from the non-cumulative.
Yeah, I was going to come to that. If you say you only scrub off 8 inches per every mile, do the maths, and you won't have scrubbed off enough.
No, that's a slope.
No.
Yeah, that's a slope. Exactly, that's a slope. That's a slope, precisely.
Yeah, slope, exactly. But you're
3 miles is 72 inches, whereas that would be only 24 inches.
No. The distance will reset each time you reset it. The cumulative angle doesn't. This is a mathematical concept. If you
it doesn't reset. That's where you're.
No, let Adam say it. Let's let him describe it mathematically. Go ahead, Adam.
If you go and reset yourself at the point, so after the first mile, all right, if you're 50 foot in the air, 100 foot in the air, and you travel that first mile and there's the 8 inches drop, right? You're 8 inches higher than you were. Okay, but if during that mile, at the end of that mile, you drop 8 inches, you're still 100 foot in the air. You travel another 100, another mile, you've still only got 8 inches to.
No, wrong.
Well,
wrong. You're starting back over again. You can't do that
because you've dropped 8 inches. Now, that only applies to the height above the air. What it doesn't apply to is your starting angle vector. You can readjust by dropping on the x-axis, and that's fine. That keeps those in line. But what it doesn't do is realign the angle. You get the perversion through the angle, but you can get apologetics through the altitude. But the angle...
No, you can't get any apologetics. You are not taking into account the cumulative drop. You're starting over after every mile. That's a slope.
The cumulative drop after 1 mile is what?
Not after 1 mile, the cumulative drop over 500 miles, dude.
In that first mile that you're flying.
Oh my God. Again, I'm not doing it.
I agree with QE Adam.
I agree with Adam.
You can.
No, I agree with Adam. I agree with Adam. I think he's right.
I'll go around the argument anyway. Go on.
Well, I think Adam's right. You can adjust it, and it would reset. So in other words, if you travelled 8 inches, it would reset. But what wouldn't happen is the plane at the end of the journey, after all those resets, wouldn't be antipodal. It wouldn't invert the plane. That's what Adam's saying.
Yeah, but he's not. He's off the mark, man. You're off the mark. You're not taking into account the cumulative drop. But you don't start over after the first mile and say, okay, the second mile is 8 inches per mile squared.
You can do. That's what I'm saying.
You
can't. If you adjust within the journey, then you can adjust for the altitude. That's what I'm saying.
No,
if you go out and plot it.
Your own argument is killing you, Adam. And I tell you why.
That's why I came when I was the reason I got to this point. And the reason I got to the angles was having plotted out the journey by just doing altitude corrections. And it was at that point you could see that you could do that, okay, by and traverse on a board. But the consequent was that your plane was about face. Yeah,
but Adam, you're killing your own
argument. And work on it and plot it out, but go and do it. And you will see that you can adjust for that bit. What you can't adjust for is the consequent of the shape of the Earth changing underneath you and that reorientation.
But that's QE's point.
I agree.
One second, Elijah. That's QE's point, and that's the point I would make. The reason you don't end up antipodal is because you're not actually adjusting for the drop, the accumulative drop. If you were, you would end up antipodal.
Don't different. That's the point of this slide. It's so convoluted, you can't. So the only way you can compare the two journeys is mathematically in Fantasyland, because there's only one reality, and that's traveling across a flat plane. So to try and put any of those experiences into the ball, it convolutes it like it does in this. So if you plot the two mathematically as the two, you can compare, and I promise you guys.
Adam's right. I don't know why you're fighting him.
I'm strengthening the point in the vectors that it goes through, and I can bore the shit out of you and show you. But trust me, if
those vectors are based on going around and then ending up antipodal.
If I'm walking around a roundabout, okay, I'm walking around it, but I'm going to walk around it in straight lines. Yeah. Now, I can stay the same distance from the roundabout by walking a straight line. That takes me away from it, and then I take a step back in, yeah? But by the time I've gone from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, I've rotated 45 degrees. I'm still the same distance from the roundabout, but because all I've done is in straight lines away from that on that initial vector and then dropped my altitude, the net result is to reorientate me.
Right, so dropping on the x-axis is equivalent to sidestepping on the roundabout whilst facing the same way. And what that doesn't do is twist you around, what would it be, the y-axis? Which is what Adam's saying.
I agree.
No, if you were walking around a roundabout, you would end up further away from it.
Because you told me hold on like 5 minutes ago, and I waited.
Okay, go on.
Come on, Eli.
Fair.
So one can be true while the other can be false. It's not. This doesn't. weaken his argument at all if he's wrong about the calculation for drop. It's still true that the plane would be angling away from the starting position. I said this a few months ago, and I was told I was wrong just the same. And I got to start doing diagrams or presentations because I said the same thing. And I agree here. Like, yeah, it would be doing what he's saying it would be doing.
That's not the problem here. You're missing it. You got to do the cumulative drop. Why are you guys talking about fucking merry-go-rounds and shit? The 8 inches per mile doesn't start over at the second mile, and then the third mile, well, it has to drop 8 inches. Then the fourth mile, 8 inches. Yeah, I could do. No! Goodness.
Exactly. I totally agree.
That's where you're wrong.
No, because
how can I be wrong?
You can accommodate for the altitude just like that. It's perfectly fine.
It's not. It's not. Oh my god!
I love Adam's confidence.
That's not living on a slope. That's the whole point. You're not comprehending what I'm saying. If you think
you're not comprehending what I'm saying.
Look, I don't think that. Look, stop.
That's exactly what happens.
Stop.
The plane's
Hello, Adam. Hold on. Right, I don't think the comprehension level is a problem here. I think we should just reach a consensus. So let's vote on
it. I hate consensus.
The plane is like traveling on steps. If you think of it like that, it's going on a slope.
I'm talking about the plane.
Sure.
I'm not talking about the plane. I'm talking what it's flying over.
Yeah, I totally agree, QE. That even Adam's diagram shows that what he's saying is not going to happen. And what Adam says about going around the roundabout, you'll actually end up further away from the roundabout, bit by bit by bit. You won't be able to go around it. But the roundabout will go away from it.
I think why are you saying what he's saying wouldn't happen? What does that have to do with the wrong calculation or right whatever you guys are talking about doesn't have to be true while his secondary point, which is actually my favorite point to it, false. What you guys saying is correct. Doesn't make what he's saying incorrect.
Can I just make one point, and then I've got to walk the dog. If on this 1,000-mile journey, and there's X amount of curvature, if after 250 miles of it, there's a certain amount of curvature that's been accrued, and the pilot at that point decides to deal with it and drop back down to being 100 foot above the air. What's the calculation from the cumulative for the cumulative curvature from that point on?
The next mile. The next mile. Hold on, I'll answer.
Okay. No,
the next mile. I'll answer.
8 inches.
The next mile after that point, Adam, would be 8 inches.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, then, when he flies 3 miles, there should be a 72-inch drop. So if he accounts for 8 miles 3 times, that's 24 inches.
No,
because once he resets the first 8 inches. Hold on, Brian. Hold on, Brian. You're talking about from his starting point, right? So if you're watching as an observer, after the first mile, he corrects 8 inches. That does then reset his position so that the mile afterwards only has an 8-inch reset. But the net result of that is the plane isn't being inverted along that axis. It's only dropping to keep the altitude the same. But meanwhile, its arse is getting closer and closer to the ground.
Yeah, but it's squared. The drop is squared.
I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about.
From the starting point. From the starting point.
I'm on your side.
You're all getting lost in R.
Let me just try once more, because I'm going to round out shortly. Let me just try with... Hold on. Let me just try with Brian and QE once more, because Adam's tried 3 times. So you move forward on... Let me just try. You move forward...
Try what?
On the presupposed spherical Earth, you move forward 1 mile. How much drop is there?
8 inches.
So how much do you need to get back to the 0 point at that stage?
8 inches.
Once you drop 8 inches, from that point, you move out another mile. How much drop is there? Considering you've just reset to 0.
Yeah, but that's where.
Yeah, but what? What do you mean, yeah, but? Yeah, but? That's Adam's
where
point.
You're screwing up.
It's not
so
screwing up.
calculate the total amount of drop on your 1,000-mile trip going 8 inches each mile. Go ahead, do it.
Presuming from
Exactly.
So hold on, Arwin. Hold on. So hold on, Arwin. So QE. So you're saying you travel out a mile, and then you do drop 8 inches. You're saying you don't reset to 0 then?
No, I'm not saying that. What the hell? What are you guys smoking?
Well, hold on, let me just try once more. I'm nearly everyone. Hello, QE and I in conversation. Hello. So, if I'm capable of levitation and I can keep on the same axis and I hover out from the ground I'm standing on a mile, there's only 8 inches below me. So when I drop 8 inches, I'm on the ground again, aren't I? The only problem is, nearly there. Yeah. The only problem is, I'm now tipping back on my heels when I get there. So I drop 8 inches and only drop 8 inches in that axis. I'm now tipping back slightly. Now I do the same process. From the ground, from 0, I move forward a mile, hovering. And then I just drop in that axis 8 inches. Now I'm leaning back even further on my heels, but I'm still on the ground. The accumulative drop is negated because you correct for it 8 inches per mile and drop to 0. So you drop 8 inches. Now, there is a slight problem with this, which is that measurement changes as you rise in altitude, right? Now, we haven't factored that in, but I just want to throw that in as a bit of a spanner in the works right at the end. The circumference would increase, Adam. As you go up in altitude, the circumference would increase.
Yeah, but the problem you have with this 8 inches thing, if you do 8 inches 3 times, you'll have 24 inches, whereas the drop is 72.
You're not doing it 3 times. You're not listening. You're not doing it 3 times. You're doing it once and then resetting to 0. Not 3 times, once. You're not hovering out to the mile point and then going, I'm not going to drop now. I'm just going to hover out another 2 miles on one axis. Because then you would have the accumulative drop to account for. But because you reset, you drop 8 inches, slightly leaning back on your heels, Adam's point, you're back at 0.
Yeah, but if you keep doing that, what you're saying, you see, the problem is, what Adam is saying is, if he keeps doing that, he has to end up antipodal.
Yeah, that's his point.
But either you're following the curve or you're not.
Yeah, that's his point. That's Adam's point. So Brian has now agreed with Adam and made it seem like he's arguing against him when you were disagreeing with him 2 minutes ago.
2 different points, man.
No, we're not.
That's what I was trying to say for the last 20 minutes.
That's exactly what I said. Yes, it's not mutually exclusive. I'm saying
it's human nature. This is. This is human nature.
Aircraft with his little 8 inch. Yeah,
it's not just ballers, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just ballers. It's human nature. This is human nature.
Well, I'll just try the argument. Go on, say sorry.
I'm just saying we're arguing 2 different points. He's right. I don't even know how we got on this angle.
No worries.
I don't really know what it has anything to do with anything. Right? I really don't. Because you have to negotiate the drop. Period.
He did 8 inches at a time.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, he did.
No, he did.
He did.
You guys keep stuck on the launch point while Adam is taking it from the airplane's point of view. And you keep on getting stuck on the launch point.
Not at all. Not at all. I have my example with each time dropping 8 inches and hitting the ground. You can't go any further than the ground. You go out a mile. There's only 8 inches to drop. So you drop it. You're back at 0. Well, other than being tipped back on your heels, you're still back on the ground after 8 inch drop. Well, then you move out another 8 inches, another mile, sorry. And what do you know? What's below you? Well, only 8 inches. So you drop again. Adam's point's perfectly valid.
Well, I destroy Adam's
even if you
argument.
didn't reset, and didn't reset, and it was cumulative.
But you did. But you did.
But what I'm saying is, even if it didn't reset and it was cumulative, airplane's angle would still change.
Yeah, but I'll destroy the whole lot now straight away, right? And
Adam's point is,
I wanted to say this earlier, but I wanted to get into the argument of it. Go on, Nathan. I'll say.
Well, Adam's saying it is cumulative if you don't drop the 8 inches after the first mile. If you just carried on the same axis, the same in the same direction, the same vector, then you'd have an accumulative drop to account for. But you're saying that.
But Adam is also claiming you won't end up antipodal.
Euclidean axis.
That's correct.
Instead of the R-based axis, right? The difference.
Nathan, you're getting rumpus.
Go on, Armin.
I'm doing that.
Hold on, go on, Armin.
Just wanted to say, just try to keep things straight, because we're trying to, or Adam was engaging in a mind experiment of how the globe would be, and basically constantly working with the R-based system. But if you're talking about going on a straight axis, you got to differentiate by pointing at that it's a Euclidean axis, so it's not R-based, right? Otherwise, it's going to mess up constantly. What we're talking about.
Hold on. So what you're saying is if you're using non-Euclidean geometry, we'd get a different result?
Right, circumdicular geometry.
I knew that was where this was going. God. I knew it. I knew it.
Can I offer an analogy?
Yes, go ahead.
It's like a relay race. The first plane goes up, and after a mile, he meets up with the second plane that just got up. And all he has to do is drop 8 inches to hand the baton to that guy, and then on and on and on. So this is what Adam is saying. So the first plane goes up, and then after a mile it comes down 8 inches. Well, where's the marker in the sky? Well, if you use another plane that just started its journey separate of the first, he would just match up and line up to that altitude by 8 inches.
Yeah, but Adam's diagram destroys his own argument there, because his diagram and his argument is that with that accelerometer is that there was no change in the direction. That there'd have to be a change in the direction of down, even by doing
What happens when he's on his heels?
Hang on. He has to end up antipodal if he's going from London to Perth or Perth to London. So consequently, Adam's 8 inches won't work. It doesn't work. It won't drop him by 8 inches.
Yeah. Hold on. Brian, yes, you're correct. That's what he's trying to point out, though. He's trying to say it wouldn't work because you'd invert the plane when the plane needs to land on its wheels rather than on its back. So just accounting for the drop as you go along wouldn't account for the fact that you've got to rotate the plane. Now, that would mean you've physically got to nose it down towards the direction you've also accounted for the drop in. Now, that isn't happening. That's why he's got an example of him on the plane saying, well, where's them nosing down around the 8 inches as I've accumulated it? At a degree value, forget the 8 inches at that point, what degree is the plane not rotated around?
Yeah, but the 8 inches is based off of the surface of the sphere.
Yeah, and you'd have to account for that. Yeah. And that would give you
because he won't end up upside down.
Yeah, and that would mean you'd have to rotate. Yes, and that would mean you'd have to rotate. Yes, and that would mean you'd have to rotate the plane around the surface beneath it rotating, i.e. falling away.
Accounting for the drop, you wouldn't.
No, because you...
What I'm saying.
Accounting for the drop doesn't...
Accounting
for the drop doesn't account for the angle of rotation. I think is that the most concise way I can put it, Adam?
Yes. Oh, my bad.
You're not Adam.
No, Adam's walking the dog.
The amount of drop doesn't account for the amount of angular rotation the plane body itself would have to do to account for the fact that there's going to be an antipodal motion in play when it arrives. And it's not rotating about itself.
I'll destroy the whole lot.
The plane would have to do a forward flip at the same rate.
I'll destroy the whole lot right now.
Hold on, whoever's rumpusing Brian. Start again, Brian. You got rumpus.
Sorry. The whole thing, the whole premise Adam is talking about with the 8 inches drop, that's completely destroyed by takeoff. Because the plane could be 10 or 15 minutes getting to cruising altitude before it ever levels out.
Oh, that's a good point. Hold on, that's a good one. What have you got to say to that, Adam? Are you still here? That was epic, Brian.
Thanks, Nathan. I wanted to make that months ago.
No, that's a very good point, Adam. Did you hear that?
No, he's walking the dog.
Adam's walking the dog.
Oh, okay. Well, I think even without Adam here, that's a very good point, right? The angle that it's taking to get to cruising altitude completely, just the takeoff process alone completely ruins this argument in terms of how it would come to pass in the first instance when you're taking off, because you're only angling up. But then again, I still think that would give you the same effect. I still think Adam would argue, I'm just speaking on his behalf here, I hope you don't mind, that the same principle would apply, right? You get to cruising altitude and your tail end would be much closer to the ground because you haven't inverted the plane around the drop, which is more akin to Adam's point.
No, because how much distance do you cover when you're flying at an angle? The Earth is curving down the way, and you're flying at an angle up the way, and you're making a distance. You could be flying any 20, 30 miles.
Yeah, hold on, Brian. Everyone quiet a second. Yes, good.
More than 8 inches.
Yes, good point, Brian.
To what you're saying.
Hang on, leave me finish. You're stopping me from talking. Leave me just finish this point. The point I'm making is if you're flying for 10 or 15 minutes to get the proper cruising altitude, then you're flying, you might be flying at an angle, but you're still covering a distance. So if you cover 20 miles, that's a 20-mile drop, not 8 inches.
Okay, great. But you keep saying you're killing his argument, but only addressing the part that has nothing to do with the angle of the plane. Or the attitude of the play. That's my problem. Stop saying that because you're not even addressing it.
So John was right all along.
Completely annihilating.
Hold on, John was right all along. These are two different things then. So therefore, the two are very much related though. So you could also argue within Brian's point about the drop that would be not exponential. That would be the squared function that's not occurring as you're ascending. You could also take the same example and say, as ascending at an angle pointing upwards, with the Earth dropping away from you at an angle, you'd have to invert, i.e. rotate the plane around to get it to line up with the drop that you're facing. Now, obviously, that's not possible upon ascent. Now, that's a totally different argument, but using the same example. So one argument is saying there's going to be a squared function of drop that you'd have to account for, and during takeoff you're going up, so the drop is obviously going to be increasing. You're not going to be accounting for the drop as you're ascending, so that's the QE drop argument. And then you take Adam's argument and say, well, as you're ascending, the angle beneath you is falling away, and the plane isn't obviously rotating nose down to account for the fact that the curve is moving away from it. Therefore, it must rotate its axis to line up with the curve that's dropping away from it. Well, it doesn't, it can't, it's ascending. But they're two different arguments. So kudos QE for spotting that. I poo-pooed you at the start. Sorry. Both good arguments.
Sorry, the QE, go on, sorry.
I was just saying both equally good arguments, but not to be confused with one another. They are separate arguments.
Yeah. Well, what about this? If you flew in a straight line straight off of the ball for 10 miles, you would have an 800-inch drop. But if you flew up at an angle away from the ball for 10 miles and covered a 10-mile straight line distance, then you're going to have more than an 800-inch drop.
Yeah,
so there's no
you would.
way that you can account for the drop.
Yeah, absolutely. It would get worse. It would get more. You're right. Absolutely. And equally, the plane would have to rotate about its axis more. Adam's point. They're equally valid.
Thank you.
Both good points.
That's yes. Why not? Like if it's a squared function and the ground is dropping at a more rapid rate, then why wouldn't that be the same for the angle of the plane?
It would. It's just a different point that you can make separately, or at the same time. It doesn't matter. It depends how well you understand both arguments. But they're both valid points. It's a perfect way for me to conclude this because there was a bit of confusion. Now we're all clear. With that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and Google Panels for making today's after show possible. Of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. Be sure to check out nathanoakley.com and the Flat Earth Debate Forum to keep up to date with the community debate. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.